Hello, everyone. So, the instructional delivery model that I chose to research and write my paper over was direct instruction. I teach English 3, juniors, and I find that writing is very difficult for students to conceptualize without direct instructions. Giving them just a set of expectations and expecting them to create something based off of that alone is a very difficult feat for them. Not all students, but the majority. I really liked this quote. I thought it was so important from Reagan and Berkeley. It says, knowing the importance of modeling and its positive influence on students' learning is fairly simple to rationalize. We understand that if you want them to replicate a certain style, seeing it is obviously beneficial. However, how to effectively provide explicit modeling can be challenging for teachers. I thankfully had the benefit of getting my master's in English, and so writing is a natural component in my life. However, I've encountered many English teachers who said, like, well, I'm a reading teacher, not so much a writing teacher. So if they're not comfortable in their own writing, I can see how modeling would be a very difficult task for them because when you don't know how to teach writing, you end up resorting to doing the writing for students and then they copy it, maybe add a few little details and components of their own, but mostly they're just following and replicating work that already exists. And that's not quite so beneficial because they can't formulate and articulate their own ideas if they don't practice it. And so direct instruction is very important in that because it shows them what needs to be done without doing it for them. And it shows them how writing should look without producing the writing itself. So the example I have for the lesson plan, this is an assignment we did earlier in the year for The Great Gatsby. So to give you context, we'd already read The Great Gatsby. They'd already taken a comprehension test over it, a multiple choice test. So that's a lot of recall, what happened in the story, maybe what it meant a little bit, but it was more so like, did you read and were you paying attention? This is the second component to that. So what students had was they were supposed to track a symbol throughout the story. And there were a couple on here that we already provided. And if they found another one that they appreciated, they could use that. So the direct instruction portion comes in because right here, my team and I had already created an example. So there was already something for them to visualize how this assignment, how their writing should be planned out. There are 4 components they needed to answer, and this one already shows exactly what it should look like if you had completed the 4 components correctly. So right here, they needed to identify the symbol. Well, we did West Egg. That's the symbol we provided, the I do. I like it because it is not one of the options up here. So they couldn't just take what a team of teachers already created and just rewrite it slightly and submit it. They had to choose something different. So this shows what it should look like without being exactly what it should look like. So for identifying the symbol right here, we tell them, hey, these are some things that eggs mean in, historically, contextually literature. And then showed them how they should do their quote. You have to have evidence to support what you're going to say about your symbol. And then for the second box, context, what's literally happening in the story around this? Because if you don't know what's happening in the story, you definitely can't explain what's going on in your quote and how it then applies to the symbol. And then these questions. And I find showing them how long it should be helps because if you hold up this paragraph next to one that's 2 sentences, do you feel you answered all 4 questions? If you only have 2 sentences, no, you physically can't. So this gives the expectation of how long their responses should look. Because even if I say 6 to 8 sentences, I tend to get 2. So comparing the 2 physically should help. And then self-evaluation. We've got a rubric down here on the end so they can grade where their progress is and where it should go. Now, that was the example that was already created. I did an example with them, the we do part, because there was a second teacher example. So as I worked through this with them, they were supposed to have written it down. So they had then 2 examples, 2 complete examples to kind of visualize, eyeball, when they then go down to doing the 3 independently for the you do. So for this one, I chose to do the eyes. And once I'd done it, that was removed from the options. They couldn't then do it because that just ends up with my example being repeated back at me endless times by students. So we chose the eyes, we worked through it together. I asked, what do eyes usually symbolize in literature and life? A lot of them were able to say eyes are the windows to the soul, and that's great. Eyes was also an easy one because, the billboard of Dr. Eckelberg continually pops out throughout the story. So they knew that was what they were looking for when it came to the quotation evidence portion. So they were able to find that one pretty easily. And they also were able to tell me context. It's the first time Nick and Tom are going into town and he meets Myrtle, Tom's mistress. So that's good. Working through the questions a little bit harder. We got to prompt a lot of that. They can often find the symbol, but saying what it's actually, the concept behind it, the idea it's possessing, that's a little bit different. So we have to do a lot of misconceptions and clarification when it comes to that. And then self-evaluation, where would we recommend we have been? And then I release them. They go and do their examples 1, 2, and 3 themselves. Now I let them work with groups to help them find quotes if they need it. Some of them chose to work independently, some of them did. I don't have a problem with them working in groups to identify evidence because their explanations of the evidence will not be the same. So if they all chose the same symbol in a group and then they found the same quotes, that's great because their analysis of it should not be the same regardless of the context and the evidence being the same, reasonably, as long as they didn't plagiarize. Now, as we're doing all of this, we also had created, where is it? This document right here, which is sentence stems. I teach on level and I've got a lot of special ed and ESL students. This is invaluable to them because it really gives them something to work off of. A lot of kids ask me, like, well, how should I start it? Right here, that document works along with the direct instruction. This is how you should start it. And there's a lot of options too. So I'm not just getting the same formulaic response over and over again. So right here, every single section of the 4 on the chart had its own groups of sentence stems, and then there's examples of how to complete them. Again, the examples are for options that were not available to them on the sentence stem. So again, they can't just copy what's already written down for them. And so we've got right here sentence stems, here sentence stems, and those are all there to help them out. So, that direction instruction, that modeling that's so necessary, this is really convenient, especially for kids who struggle to produce their own sentence starters. Now, that was part 1 of the assignment. Part 2, once they're done, once they've evaluated, is this right here. And again, we've got an example that's already provided for them. This is where they've identified their symbol, they've identified what it meant, they analyze it, and now they're going on to determine the theme and how those symbols created the theme, helped to develop it. Again, we've got some options, and again, we've got an I do. There wasn't a we do for this portion, but we did the I do, and it's still following the same path as the part 1. So they're going to choose, and there were wrong answers. I had to make that clear. These are options for your theme, but it has to match with the symbol. So the idea of gender was not so much with the eyes, okay? It would be more along the eyes of moral decay. It's watching people fail to live up to decency and expectations. But we've got the example here, and so they'd fill that out. And again, rubric, analyzing themselves, constantly checking. And while they're doing this, I'm checking up on them to make sure they're actually completing it. We did give about 2 to 3 days on this, so they could get everything done. Finding quotes takes them quite a bit of time because they can tell me in particular, like what happened, but they can't tell me exactly when it happened, and that's when I'm willing to help out. If you can tell me exactly the scenario, what was going on, I'll help you with the page number. But just asking, hey, miss, what do you think is a good quote for Daisy? You're on your own there. Now, the purpose of all of this is that it eventually culminates in our summative assessments. So this right here is the, no, let me just make that smaller so we can all see it better. The summative assessment. Essentially, they're taking all of the information they've already created and then they're creating a visual medium for it, like this assignment. Instead of a video, though, they did Google Slides. So again, it's just all the focus we already had on the tracking sheet, but now put into a visual medium. They're creating Google Slides. It takes as long as it takes because there are some questions on here that were not added in the tracking sheet. So while the base information is the same, they're providing their quotes, they're providing their context, they're analyzing. There's some additional questions right here, these 4 questions that they're going to have to now answer along with the information they already put on the tracking sheet. And they're adding pictures, the intent is to teach their classmates. We had an example, I don't have it available here, it's on my school desktop, of what this would look like for them over again West Egg. So not something they could explicitly copy, but something they can use as a model to then guide them when creating their own. And so at the end of the day, they need to create their slides. They need to present it to their classmates and to me and teach them because not everyone chose the same symbol. A lot of people chose similar ones, but then there were a few outliers who chose something that was off the list or chose something that just wasn't quite as popular, and they're going to teach their classmates. And then I grade their progress off of that. And then before I get the rubric, I have them grade it themselves. Some of them just run through, pick whatever. But a lot of them put thoughts, and the ones who really think about it and really grade themselves according to what's on the rubric, they're likely to be correct. Oftentimes I grade similar to what they've analyzed themselves as being capable of doing. And that is the example of my direct instruction model.